Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk have been appointed to the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. How will this impact the United States' economic future and your economic future? Let's get into it. Before we get into the details of what Vivek and Elon are going to be doing, let's first look at all the inefficiencies in the federal government spending, what all they would need to cut, and what impact they could have. So let's do that. So breaking down the U.S. government's 2024 fiscal year, Brian, we're going to look at this graphic here. What's going on?
Yeah, so this graphic shows basically how much the U.S. government brings in on the left and how much is spent on the right. And what I find really exciting about this graph in light of our conversation is that Elon has said that he can take about $2 trillion off of government spending without decreasing the amount of services provided.
So I don't know exactly how Elon's going to take off $2 trillion worth of government spending, but you're saying the deficit would be taken care of. What does that mean exactly when we say the deficit's taken care of? Because currently our total debt is what?
Right now it's about 35 trillion.
35 trillion, and the deficit is how much extra we're spending every year, adding and tacking on to that.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so you build the deficit by basically not taxing enough to cover your expenditures.
Okay.
And it's been an idea for a long time that rather than a taxation issue, the U.S. government has a spending issue.
I totally agree with that. That makes sense. And we can look into maybe some dumb ways the government spends on things. I don't think this quite gets into all of the different things that are stupid they spend stuff on. But
they do show categories on the right, so we could go over those.
Sure. So social security, like some people argue that's necessary. Health.
Yeah, Social Security is important, but one of the ideas, I think it was under Bush's administration that was brought up, or actually it was McCain who brought this up, that you could invest the Social Security taxes into the stock market and actually generate income similar to what most of us would have in like a 401k. So that would be one thing Elon could do, is change how Social Security is managed, which would then turn this into actually a profit center for the U.S. government.
Right. And he can't do that himself. It's actually, I think this is a third party. They're not in the government. They're outside the government. So they're basically advisors to the president on how everything is and how to cut costs. So maybe restructuring Social Security might be a good thing. However, currently what they're doing with Social Security, aren't they taking it? And so people like you and me who are working the economy, we're paying our taxes into Social Security. But then they're taking that money that we've paid into it and borrowing it for other activities, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's being mishandled.
So it sounds like a giant Ponzi scheme.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. And that creates problems. So at this point, there's probably no money to invest into the stock market.
So there might actually be some. It depends on how they've treated it and what kind of fancy bookkeeping they've done.
Now, I don't have an article showing this, but some ways that the government has spent too much money. I think there was a transgender show in some country that they were spending money on for some reason. They were having a shrimp run on a treadmill. I mean, I've heard of people spending $400 for a hammer, right, in the federal, like a normal hammer in the federal government. And then the idea that there's a lot of people that don't work. And the reason why, Brian, if I'm not mistaken, is because when you're able to take money from from people and they don't have a choice to give it, but you don't have to provide value first in return in exchange for their dollars, and you are incentivizing your departments to not necessarily do anything good, and you're just kind of going to create more waste. Maybe I'm phrasing that improperly.
So
Can you help me with that?
There's two different issues at play here. One of them you brought up, I think, is internal to the agency, which is basically if the agency spends all of its money this year, the idea is it gets more money the next year. Whereas if they don't spend it all, they will get their budget cut. And no federal agency wants their budget cut. So that means they tend to waste their money rather than spend it wisely, if they have extra, especially.
Well, and it's so hard because most of people employed by the federal government, they don't ever get fired. They don't have to worry about getting fired. They want to keep their budget, like you're saying. So it's all based on how much they can spend instead of how much they could save and how much. Well, I mean, the idea would be the least amount of government workers in the federal government, the better for the economy and innovation in general, because now you have more people in the private sector providing value first to people before their dollars are exchanged for that value they're providing to those people.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think I'm excited to see what Elon and Vivek have in mind. I heard they're going to use a leaderboard. And in fact, let's pull up the article talking about them a little bit. All right, Trump appoints Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy over the new government agencies. Well, not really over the new government agencies. Like I said earlier, this is going to be a third-party affiliation advisorship to Donald Trump. They're going to basically be able to go in and see what all the federal agencies are spending money on, whether the federal agencies are even necessary for the security of the nation, for I don't know, whatever the goals that the voters have in mind, right? That's kind of the idea, to clear out any unnecessary waste. Okay, but anyways, we're gonna go down. I think there was a statement down here. Trump said that both Musk and Ramaswamy will take changes to the current federal bureaucracy and will improve life for all Americans by eliminating massive waste and fraud as part of the $6.5 trillion in current government spending. And we looked at that one graph that showed $1.8 trillion that's being tacked on every year that the tax dollars are not covering, right? That's adding to the debt.
That's correct.
So if they can go and I think they were claiming to cut down $2 trillion. If they do that, then we're good. We're golden. All right. So they have 2 years to do this. It sounds like, or roughly 2 years.
Yep.
I have heard I heard a lawyer on the channel Farzard. I don't remember the name. Maybe we should actually pull that up. We could maybe bring it up in a later video. But they could have some legal issues because of how the whole thing is set up and the impossibility to get rid of certain members in the federal government agencies based off of civil servant protections and stuff.
Yeah. So this is something we've been building for the last 100 years. So I would be very surprised if it's easy to get rid of.
Since who? Woodrow Wilson?
Yeah, about the 1920s.
1920s. So it's so fun. It's so, oh man, I don't know if I like it. What would have happened, Brian? Let's use a hypothetical. What do you think would have happened if we didn't build federal agencies like we've built currently over the last 100 years? Do you think we'd be in a better place, or do you think we'd be in a worse place? Maybe we'd be conquered by Germany because we didn't have enough people in the security departments to figure out what's going on and protect us against them. What do you think?
Yeah, Charlie, that's a really good question. So every single federal agency was built out of a need. And at the time that federal agency was started, that need was valid and should have been resolved. So, for example, the CIA came about during the rise of Russia when the Russians had a very effective spy agency. And the CIA was our counter to that. But now the CIA has been upstaged by things like the NSA and the FBI, which are doing similar kind of spying roles. And so what you get is this bureaucratic creep where you get more and more agencies covering issues that may no longer be there.
Okay, that makes sense. So basically, we shouldn't be creating federal agencies, right? It sounds like we should be creating commissions, which is what this sounds like. It's a temporary organization or structure that's going to be coming in and doing a specific task, and then they're done. With the CIA, some have argued that they've caused more trouble than they have been worth, and so that could be true.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of disagree with you with the idea of commissions. I think agencies are probably fine because there are times and places where they need to fix something.
Okay.
But there should be some sort of a time limit or something on that existence, because if you have an agency, for example, maybe the agency of horse and buggy regulation back in the 20s, well, with the event of cars, that's no longer a valid agency. And so we need to cut that agency rather than letting it morph into the Department of Transportation, for example, which now has maybe laws on the books about horses and buggies, but now controls cars and so on. So my point is that we should focus agencies more. We don't necessarily need to change how they're structured. It's just that they need to be focused on doing a job, and they need to have things like this that hold them accountable.
The problem is there's no incentive to stop being a big agency at this point, right?
So that's where this government, I think, is going to do a really good job of de-incentivizing some of those big agencies and penalizing them for being inefficient.
I don't know if they'll be able to penalize them specifically. Again, I think they're going to run into some issues, and it's going to cause, like, if you're a lawyer right now, I think you're probably gearing up for some good employment, because you're probably going to get a lot of federal.
Yeah. So Charlie, remember two things here. First of all, the executive branch. These are all part of the executive branch.
Yeah.
Which is led by Trump.
Yes.
So pretty much he can flick his fingers and get rid of an agency if he wishes.
I don't know. Is that true? I would like to look that up, because apparently I've heard, like, I looked that up earlier, and I wish that were true, honestly. I think that would be great, because that would make sense. But the idea is, if there was a president that was elected and he came in and, like, got rid of all the agencies, he could become a dictator or something. But you can't, because we have three areas of government, or three bodies of government, right? So
Yep.
like the idea that, oh, he can be a dictator if he got rid of the agencies. No, it doesn't make sense. So
yeah, he's not allowed, obviously, to get rid of the houses of Congress.
yeah.
And there are probably agencies in here that have oversight roles to the president. So they may have had protections installed by Congress when they were created. Because a lot of these agencies do have some congressional approval steps.
Gotcha. So some of them are set up by Congress, and then the president uses them.
But here's the thing, though. Remember, the Congress is now controlled by the Republicans as well.
Yeah.
And so as long as nothing's really stupid about this, and I think as long as Elon Musk and Vivek actually do a good job of explaining why the agency doesn't need to be the size it is, they should actually have pretty good grounds to get rid of most of these agencies. And because of full governmental control with the Republicans, the odds are they'll actually be able to act on it.
Gotcha. What personal impact, if they were able to cut down the federal government spending by $2 trillion, so we're no longer going into debt, where we balance the budget essentially, which still doesn't get rid of the debt necessarily, what financial impact do you think that'd have on ordinary citizens? Would that be a good thing for us, or?
So it wouldn't have any impact on us in 10 years, for the next 10 years, basically, because the government would have to continue to tax at the same rate it is right now to keep the budget balanced.
Got it.
But there's a couple of things that would happen over the long term. First of all, fewer agencies means fewer changing regulations. So we wouldn't have to be dealing with all these regulations changing from administration to administration. Another thing that would be big is, over the next few years, we would continue to pay off the national debt. When you pay off the national debt, that decreases the tax burden of the debt, so that in the time that it takes to pay it off, however many years it's currently calculated to take to pay off, we can eventually have no debt, which would decrease the tax burden substantially. So that would result in massive growth. The other thing that's nice about this is it would also decrease the size of the government, which makes the government much more focused and more agile at fixing actual problems. So, for example, FEMA might be focused only on disaster relief rather than immigration, which would mean that it would be a more effective disaster relief agency. So we'd see a government that probably works better for us, as well as a long-term massive asset, because it would decrease the debt.
Okay, my question would be then, well, it seems like regulations don't always do what they're intended to do, right? So that is something that could counter my argument. But we're going to see some major technological advances, I think, in the next 10 years. I from what I'm hearing, humanoid robots are definitely could be a thing, along with some solid AI technologies that theoretically could reach sentience, although I don't know how much of that is accurate in the sense of sentience as we think of it. And so, do you think it's a bad thing to have a smaller government to regulate those issues that could lead to potential destruction of humanity?
So what you're describing is basically a technology that becomes a national security threat.
Yeah.
And in that particular case, we have all the structures already designed into our government. The military, for example, which is, I believe, constitutionally mandated. Things like that are and can be dealt with either through Congress or by direct executive act. None of that is affected by these agencies. What happens inside the agency, and we actually saw this with the advent of drones a few years ago, was that the agencies actually slow things down. And so it took the FAA years to come up with guidance about drones. And in the meantime, these little drones have been crashing into things, crashing airplanes, hitting airplanes, flying around airports, and so on. And by the time the FAA got around to issuing guidance, pretty much the drones had passed in the fad. And so now you have an overregulated hobby with very few people that are actually getting into it now. And so that's a classic case of regulation coming in too late and being too little to actually help with a serious problem, and instead just overregulating an industry out of existence, more or less.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
So
So
same thing would
basically,
happen with AI.
So basically, the government agencies regulating potentially don't have any effect on. They wouldn't be helpful against any Skynet scenario, Terminator scenario.
No, they wouldn't. That's completely on the military, the executive branch to respond to. And that's the reason why we have an executive, so that we can get that active, quick response. So if somebody comes up with an AI that starts just killing people across the board, the next day the president can make an executive order and we can implement solutions.
Gotcha. So regarding how about jobs in the future? Because if we see this growth, this massive innovation in the next 10 years, which I think is very possible at this point, we could see a lot of people out of work because their jobs become not really necessary.
Yep.
Do you think we'd have to start creating artificial jobs, and potentially would they have to be government jobs?
Yeah. So right now, the rise of any technology, robotics, whatever, has been destroying jobs for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
And what we see is very consistently in the affected field, people tend to lose their jobs, and then they have to be retrained, or they retire because they're obsolete. But in the long term, we see a rise in gross domestic product per person, which means that we are a more prosperous country, and also means that we have greater agility on the world stage, because even with fewer people, we're making more money.
Right, that makes sense. But you could argue the argument, because I've seen some charts and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the productivity of people has gone up significantly because of technology. However, the pay has not kept up with the rise in productivity. And so I'm curious if we do see this rise in technology. Corporations are always looking at their bottom line, right? And I understand that. That's kind of what you got to do.
Yep.
You're going to buy a bunch of robots that could pretty much if they can do pretty much anything a regular human could do, and you don't have to pay them except for maybe provide the electricity and the power, and it's way cheaper than hiring a human. You're going to do that, which then makes it so that people have less jobs. So, I mean, if that is, I know you're saying like new jobs will come up, but I don't know if that's completely true, or maybe we're going to have to look from jobs on Earth and more to space travel kind of things.
So have you stepped inside a manufacturing plant?
I have not. Well, but not really.
So what you would find is that's actually already happened. It's been around since the 70s. And the number of people in food processing, in actual manufacturing, nuclear waste processing, and so on that are actually working the physical job is probably 10% of the workforce.
Right. Well, but here's the thing. It's hard to go to college, get a degree, and then you have to learn all these things, but then your skill is obsolete, and so you have to go back to college to learn 4 years. Whereas going and cutting up boxes in a plant, that can be taught in a day, and you're being paid to do it. And so that's kind of like the thing is, we're getting to the point where the jobs that are white collar jobs are actually potentially being taken away, like normal white collar jobs, or things that, and let's face it, we're not all that smart. Not a lot of us are not that smart out here. I'm one of those people that's not that smart. So having to figure out how to how to make more money and learn a completely new skill that takes a long time to learn it could be a problem. However, you could also make the argument with the rise of innovation,
Mhm.
learning that new skill will be easier.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And so what's happened is there's so many examples, it's hard to pick one, but with the rise of AI, for example, it takes a lot of the need for basic repetitive tasks away
Mhm.
and enables you to build a simple framework to solve the problem repeatedly. We saw this with the rise of computers, and now it's just kind of that next step.
Gotcha.
And so computers have taken away the need for maybe a lawyer to have a secretary, for example, to do all of his typing. And now you can just do that yourself. You can dictate to your computer and so on. And AI helps with all that. But you still have secretaries. They're just doing a different role now. And so my point is that the role may still be there. It just won't be as repetitive and it won't be as difficult, really.
But I know corporations are going to pay you less or they'll give you less time. So maybe we're going to have to mandate, like, federal government might have to create some more regulations like they did 100 years ago regarding 40-hour work weeks. Maybe there's going to be a minimum wage increase because of that. And we can argue about minimum wage in the future, but uh, it's tough because I know for myself, it's hard to find a job in my personal field because it is easier to get into because I got a degree in business marketing.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to get into that now with the rise of technology, and a lot more people are now competing in that field, which makes it harder for you to get into that field. So you got to find something else to do or make yourself more competitive, and it's just this constant wheelhouse that doesn't end, and it feels like it's frustrating for people that are just trying to get off their feet and get started in life, right? And
Yeah. But I think a lot of that is just due to restrictive business environments more than businesses actively trying to cut employees.
gotcha. Okay. So you're saying lower regulations equals more business opportunities equals more job opportunities for people.
Precisely. Because here's the thing. So, for example, if I'm now doing marketing via AI, I still need to hire one or two people to do my marketing and control the AI. They need to quality check it. They need to post it to all the correct locations, and they need to be able to work with the AI interface. So my marketing budget will go down.
Yeah.
But that means that theoretically now there's an open market for another company to come in because your barrier to entry is now lower.
Got it. Got it.
So my point is technology changes the environment, but doesn't destroy it.
That makes sense. So we're going to see. And I guess at the same time, people will be living better, hopefully. In
Yes.
general, technology will make things cheaper. You'll have more access to things. But it also, we've seen as technology has arisen, we've seen rise in um, depression and actually health has gone way down.
Yep.
So hopefully RFK getting into the RFK Jr. getting into the federal government and working on health might actually help in those areas as well. Maybe it's because of federal government agencies not having the best interest of the people in mind. Instead, they have their own interest in mind. That's creating this environment for higher depression, higher health problems, higher everything. So, okay.
Agencies tend to regulate things out of existence. And if your job was regulated out of existence, that's a high source of depression. So I can definitely see an argument there.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Seems like the best thing we can do is just let the market do its thing and see what happens then.
That's worked for us for the last 2,000 years.
Do you think UBI could be an answer in the future?
Possibly. I think instead of UBI, because that's, again, government intervention, we'll just see a massive deflationary pressure. Because if you create the goods for much less money, now that's effectively the same as a UBI because people now have to make only a very small amount of income to afford whatever widget they want.
Do you think we might get to a place where we don't need money? Like
No.
do you think we would never, because you don't think we'd ever get to a place where we could have infinite resources
There's no way that would work
on this earth? Okay. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
All right.
Your equipment will always break.
Always?
Yeah.
Are we sure about that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's the discussion. I know we were talking about Vivek and Elon Musk. We'll see what happens, but it sounds like we just got to let them go in there and clean things out and make things look better in the federal government, and deregulate the market for a bit, and then jobs will increase in the private sector. And yes, as innovation increases, so does job automation, which can get rid of jobs, but then new jobs are created through that automation creation. So it's continued. It's a cycle that seems like it's going to continue for a while. But sounds like the federal government just gets in the way no matter what.
It can.
It can. Okay. Cool. All right. Thanks for watching. We'd love to hear what you think about the new Doge department. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Like and follow, and we'll see you in the next video. Have a good one. Bye.